The Allen Lund Company appreciates all of the dedicated carriers it takes to move loads across the U.S. Stay safe.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Scott Thompson.
Thanks for joining us. Scott here, filling in for host Mark Reddick this week. But even though Mark's not here, he left us with a couple of conversations. First, with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association. What starts as a talk about the closure of US 50 in southwest Colorado due to urgent bridge repairs turns into a conversation about resiliency and practicality when it comes to our nation's infrastructure. A good talk there coming up later. Then, whether it's crops, live animals, or even bees, the agriculture industry depends on the trucking industry to succeed. That's one reason there are exemptions to certain trucking regulations for ag haulers. David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal join the show to explain the rules, who they apply to, and how to use them. And finally, we'll catch up with Marty Ellis, the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. Marty says visitors to the OOIDA tour truck have been talking about a growing number of problems and inconsistencies within the DOT physical process of late, and Marty has noticed it too. All that coming up on today's show. But first, the news with Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Scott. A bit of a jump at the pumps. Diesel went up 4 cents a gallon, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. This is the third straight week the EIA reported the national average going up. It now sits at $3.81. All 10 regions EIA tracks saw increases. The most was in the Midwest at 6 cents a gallon, bringing the average there to $3.79. ProMiles reports this week's diesel prices went up just slightly. ProMiles.com had the Tuesday morning average at $3.75 a gallon, up just 1 cent compared to a week earlier. CargoNet is warning drivers and the logistics industry as a whole of the risk of cargo theft this upcoming weekend. The company says 2023 saw record high theft rates, but this year is on track to surpass those numbers. Some of the high-risk areas are California, Texas, and Florida. Popular targeted items thieves show a preference for are non-alcoholic beverages, especially energy drinks, major appliances, and computer electronics. Keith Lewis is the vice president of operations at CargoNet. He says cargo thieves are well aware that extended holiday closures work to their advantage. He adds that with theft activity already surpassing 2023's record highs, they are urging the industry to remain vigilant throughout the holiday weekend. Freight has come back up about 8% above normal after taking a dip for a couple of weeks. Brent Hutto with Truck Stop says he's a little more optimistic now than he was 2 weeks ago when it comes to market conditions.
Here's what I was super excited about in the market, Ashley, is where the van rates in the spot market. So the van rates in the spot market, because van is 80% of the freight that goes in the overall marketplace, and certainly it's the dominant in the for-hire long-haul marketplace in the spot market. When it goes up, it's meaningful. Flatbed and reefer are the minority part of the marketplace, but when van goes up, it's meaningful. Well, it went up 9 cents in the last 2 weeks. All right, so because I've been gone and been out of town, but so I'm super excited about that because that's the biggest part of the market. It affects the most truckers. And so that's moving back towards north towards more profitable.
Hutto says last week Texas was one of the top regions for freight. The White House is asking Congress for another $4 billion to rebuild the Key Bridge in Baltimore and respond to other recent disasters. According to the Associated Press, the money is part of a new emergency request from President Joe Biden's administration that is in addition to the $56 billion request last October that Congress ignored. AP reports that the administration wants $3.1 billion for the Department of Transportation to go toward rebuilding the Key Bridge, and nearly $80 million to go to the Coast Guard, and another $33 million to go to the Army Corps of Engineers for expenses related to wreckage removal after the bridge was struck by a cargo ship back in March. Some of the other disasters the administration is asking for funding for are the tornadoes in the Midwest and wildfires in Hawaii. A trucking company is facing a lawsuit after an overpass was significantly damaged by a strike that was caused by an oversized load. The Massachusetts Department of Transportation filed the lawsuit against Lincoln, Alabama-based Dove Transportation. The agency wants to put the trucking company on the hook for damages that were caused because of the strike. The incident in question took place on July 19th of 2021. A trucker was driving a tractor-trailer owned by Dove Transportation going southbound on Interstate 93 in Medford. He was hauling a metal tank at the time. As the truck driver was going under the second overpass of Roosevelt Circle, the metal tank struck the underside of the overpass bridge. According to the complaint, the collision occurred because the trailer and tank exceeded the height limit of the overpass bridge. This caused significant damage to the support beams. Massachusetts DOT is suing Dove Transportation on one count of negligence. The lawsuit does not state how much money the incident cost the department, nor does it include how much it is asking for from the trucking company. A fatal crash occurred over the weekend after a car drove into a tractor-trailer that was parked on the shoulder of I-75 in Florida. Marion County Fire Rescue posted that crews were dispatched after receiving multiple calls to a scene where a passenger vehicle was lodged underneath a tractor-trailer that was hauling pontoon boats. The driver of the car was declared dead at the scene. The accident remains under investigation by the Florida Highway Patrol. New toll rates are now in effect at 3 bridges that connect Kentucky and Indiana. Starting July 1st, rates increased to $2.61 for passenger cars and $15.61 for 5-axle trucks. The price depends on the size of vehicles and whether the driver has a prepaid account. These increases are for the I-65 Abraham Lincoln Bridge, the I-65 Kennedy Bridge, and State Route 265 Kentucky 841 Lewis and Clark Bridge. Under the bi-state resolution, toll rates are adjusted annually by 2.5% unless the rate of inflation, which is measured by the Consumer Price Index, is higher. A truck driving school in Iowa will soon be able to construct a driving skills training pad for students thanks to a $1 million investment from federal funding. According to the Iowa Capital Dispatch, the grant money was awarded through the community project funding process. Indian Hills Community College President Matthew Thompson said ever since he came to the school in 2013, college leaders have talked about wanting to construct a driving skills training pad for students to practice on. He says that dream is coming true thanks to these federal funds. The next 6 to 9 months will be spent working on a plan and go through the bid process. Then the college is hoping to break ground next spring to open the pad for students by the end of next summer. The California Department of Transportation has more eyes on the road thanks to almost 200 new highway cameras that were recently installed. KRON reports that the cameras went up around the Bay Area to help authorities improve safety and traffic management. The goal of the Safety Pilot program is to detect wrong-way drivers and significant traffic incidents in an effort to save the lives of motorists and pedestrians. And finally, a truck carrying 8 tons of avocados overturned recently on Highway 101 in California. According to UPI, traffic was snarled for several hours as crews had to clean up the spill. The crash did involve 2 other vehicles, but no serious injuries were reported. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. We'll talk with Marty Ellis later on in the program about DOT physicals. In the meantime, a reminder that you can write and post a review of the doctor who performed your DOT physical to be shared with your fellow truck drivers, or look up other reviews of a doctor through the OOIDA website, ooida.com. Just go to the main menu at the upper left corner of the page and under Resources, click on Certified Medical Examiner Review. Starting Thursday, Marty and the OOIDA tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the Quick Trip in Belmont, Wisconsin. That's at exit 26 off Highway 151. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA at a discount. Coming up next, we've got a conversation about a road closure that speaks volumes about infrastructure problems nationwide. Stick around, Landline Now is back right after this.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
ULSD is hurting your engine. Fight back with Howe's Diesel Defender. Get the most powerful cleaning and maximum lubricity to protect and extend the life of your entire system. At a guaranteed increase in fuel economy, and you can't go wrong with Howe's.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when you're truck on a CAT scale.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline now. Welcome back. It's no secret to most people, and especially to truck drivers, that America's infrastructure is in bad condition. Most of the attention regarding infrastructure goes to major interstates in large metro areas or to spectacular or disastrous incidents, such as the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. But in fact, a lot of the problem crops up on smaller highways, and while they may not carry the amount of traffic or get as many eyeballs on them as larger pieces of infrastructure, the fact is some of these smaller highways are in fact significant freight corridors and of great significance to local residents. One such example is US 50 Highway in southwest Colorado. A bridge along that highway has a problem that's caused it to be closed by authorities, and that's going to cause some significant problems for the truckers who use that road. I recently spoke with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association about the situation on that road and other related topics. Why don't we start with just the basic situation there for folks that maybe are not familiar and might at some point pass through that area. You've got a bridge closed. What has happened there? Why is the bridge closed? Where is it? And so on.
Well, the bridge is, it's over near, what we say, Montrose, which is in southwest Colorado. And the bridge is it was built, I think it was in the 70s or whatever. And it was a specific design, but evidently, somebody noticed that there was a crack in the structure. And then when they did some investigation on it, they said, oh my gosh, this crack is more serious than we thought, and we have to have a much greater inspection and action. So really what they did is they closed it to all traffic, okay? Now, that corridor, US 50, it's kind of like a lot of parts of western Colorado as well as other mountainous parts of the country. It isn't like there's an easy alternative. Now, for automobiles and things like this, there's a kind of like gravel road as a bypass that they can do around there. I mean, to tell you how serious, they take the bridge, okay? There's like, on one side of it, you've got some communities, and then you've got the health center on the other side of that bridge there, is that what they were doing was they were ending up actually bringing an ambulance up to one side of where the bridge, where they were concerned about, and then actually taking the patient out, wheeling it by gurney across to another ambulance and trying to take it over. So I think they don't quite know the extent of the problem on the bridge. Now, they're looking at it right now. I guess it takes a significant amount of time to even identify the extent of the problem and what needs to be done. But right now, it's like, we're looking at maybe 2 to 3 months. So what you have happening is you're going to have folks who have to go to the Southwest. Some of the folks who would be taking something like 285 and certain things coming down through to the Southwest, probably having to go across I-70 and down. In many cases, we may have to have some folks, going into adjacent state to go to their locations. I I think we're looking at this as right now for truckers almost a 3.5 hour detour. And I think what this points up, and we've brought up, is a critical need for resiliency in these networks. We can't be in a position, we have to have some options on this. We're in this society, we expect to have things, in the next day or two or whatever. And having us be able to have to make these detours, when you're looking at hours of service, you're taking, in many cases, a 1-day trip into a 2-day trip. And so it further stretches the limited number of drivers, increases costs, and it also creates a need for, so we look at additional truck parking in certain locations. And one of the things that we've pointed out, and it probably ties back to the whole thing on the, the CARB mandate, or what we've adopted, which is the Advanced Clean Truck. When you look at these alternate corridors that you may need to be on for several weeks, if we're looking at electric trucks and all that, we need to have essentially a network out there that can support them. And, the way they've envisioned in many cases, the build-out on this is that some of those corridors wouldn't have that type of build-out for, some period to come. So I think it poses some real challenges here, particularly in a state like Colorado.
Just to clarify something you said there, you mentioned that cars have this little gravel road that they can detour on, which I assume is a much shorter detour. And just to confirm, I'm assuming trucks simply cannot use that detour.
Right. And I will say, one is there's a safety aspect to it. Secondly is, how well actually, it can support trucks. It's not an easy detour on this. And, we spoke to them about this. And like even talking to our own folks on this, it is not something, like a walk in the park by any means, Mark. So it's going to be difficult. I think the real challenge that you have out here is, we have a lot of tourism in the summer, and that area gets quite a few people, and it's going to affect that without a doubt. And, along with that, then you're putting all these tourists and other things on those alternate corridors that we're trying to navigate as well. So makes for that much more difficulty and possibly extending the travel that much more.
I've seen these studies and reports that come out regularly about each state and what percentage of their bridges are functionally obsolete or in very, very bad condition. And I'm curious, do you know what the overall situation is regarding bridges in Colorado? Do they have there a high percentage of bridges that are either obsolete or kind of in trouble in terms of their condition?
I have to look at, they've made a lot of progress here, and we've worked with them on this. I mean, we actually have some funds that have been specifically set aside for bridge replacement and, bridge rehab and habilitation and that. And frankly, one of the reasons that we look at this as being, we've stressed with, the DOT, the importance is, I think what happens is there's a tendency, Mark, when DOTs look at something and they say, well, this is a fairly low volume bridge. Well, it may be a lower volume bridge, but if it's, the key bridge for us for freight movement in this area or whatever, you may have half the vehicles on there being trucks. And when you have a detour taking us 50 or 100 miles out of the way, what that does actually in terms from a safety standpoint, the cost and all this. And we've gotten them to really focus on this. And I do think one of the things that's been a real success has been, there's a number of, believe it or not, wooden structures in Colorado. And they did some innovative type effort in terms of strengthening those, which had been barring, heavier trucks from being on there. And, from a thing of time and safety and all that, it made a major difference. So I think this is one of those things where when you're looking at bridges, it's critical, especially when you end up having these sort of like choke points in the system where if that isn't there, the options, mean hours of extra time.
Okay. Well, that's all I have. Is there anything else, Greg, that you want to add or you think maybe I didn't ask about that I should have?
Well, the only thing I think of, and I think we're starting to deal with, Mark, and I think a number of states are right now, of course, is, now we're at this point where, with the advanced clean truck rules, we're one of the states where the state adopted those regulations and rules. And what you find happening is, you're in this, there's a level of competition for funding, okay, in terms of for transportation funding and needs. And so in some cases what we're doing is along those corridors, they're having to invest funding to put in the electric infrastructure as they do this and utilizing funding on this. I think the struggle that we're going to see here is looking at this whole thing of, in our case, I'd say, it's estimated by 2033, just to meet sort of the demands of the advanced clean truck, the number of units that would be sold or required to be sold by then would require us to have, another gigawatt of power in the state for just those vehicles. And that's the equivalent of, I think it's like 360 additional wind turbines, or the equivalent of 10 million LED lights, or something like 3.5 million, solar panels. We're talking about massive investments on this. And when you're looking at states like Colorado, the other wild card here is that we haven't looked at is the weather factor. We get this extreme cold out there. It's not like we're parking our vehicles inside, and you've charged it, in the morning. What percentage of power do you have? In terms of this, so we haven't really seen how that's going to work. We have range issues out here, and just all this. You're thinking about truck parking, including truck parking spaces, and what we end up looking at is like, when you look at the fact, I think we have 3,700 truck parking spaces today, okay, in the state, which is far too few. What we've mentioned is literally every single one of those spaces going forward would need to be actually an electric power, okay, on this. Because the fact is, if you're looking at moving toward 100% zero-emission vehicles, drivers aren't going to park an electric truck and take their 10-hour rest period, and then, wait to go up 5 or 20 miles up the road and wait and take 4 to 8 hours to power up their truck, actually. They're going to do it during the rest period. And so, these are these things that when you start to look at this, the investments on this, not to mention the fact that we're, in our end of it, Mark, we have several of our companies who had purchased Tesla tractors, some of whom paid full price, 2020. Not one of them has received one. One of the frustrations I would say that people like myself have is, we looked at a bridge toward the future with a number of these technologies, and we thought we would be transitioning. And we have some good pieces like natural gas and other elements as well. And all of a sudden, we just have, it's everything has to be kind of ZEV tomorrow. And as one person said, we were talking about that bridge, and we just didn't realize that when we were crossing it, that the other side was getting burned. And we've got to jump the bridge now, Mark, versus where we were.
I've been talking with Greg Fulton of the Colorado Motor Carriers Association. For Landline Now, I'm Mark Rettig. We'll be back in a moment.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads, Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
It's no secret that a big part of trucking involves an entirely different industry, agriculture. You're listening to Landline Now, and I'm your host, Mark Reddick. Welcome back to the program. Whether it's crops out of the field, live animals such as cattle and swine, or even bees carried from field to field to help pollinate crops, agriculture requires trucking in order to succeed. That's likely the reason there's a special exemption to certain trucking regulations for agricultural hauling. So what are the rules of that exemption? Who does it apply to, and how do you use it? To get some advice, I called David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal. Well, our topic here is the ag exemption. And first of all, obviously we need to kind of define what we're talking about. What is the ag exemption? Can you kind of explain that in layman's terms?
The ag exemption is one of a few exemptions that the DOT allows for motor carriers. And exemptions in general are what they sound like, exemptions to the rules. They got standard rules for everyone who's hauling, and an exemption is for a particular slice of those rules for particular people. So for ag, it's agricultural. If you are moving what they deem to be agricultural products, they have a whole list, and you're doing it in a specific way, then you're exempt from some rules. In this case, mostly it's hours of service rules.
Okay. How did this come about? Was this an FMCSA regulation? Is this an act of Congress? What put this exemption into place?
Let's see. So it was 2020, and in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Association, they clarified the definition to encompass like all living animals, farmed, raised, or bred. And actually, I don't know the exact date of when this went in, but they don't really have information on that. So, but basically, they kind of refined. Before 2020, there was kind of a free for all of people claiming these exemptions, and then they put into it. I mean, like we've had carriers that were taking canned goods, big loads of canned goods to places. Well, that's not a non-processed food. That's not an agricultural. But part of why they did it in 2020 was, of course, during the COVID whole issues, they were having people abuse this terribly. So, and so just to go on with that, non-processed foods are anything that hasn't been necessarily canned, put in a jar, freezing or drying, fresh fruits, vegetables, cereals, and oilseed crops. And they can be cleaned. They can be kept cool. They can be trimmed, cut, chopped, shucked, or bagged. I like that word, shucked. So for packaging to transport. But it just can't be processed. Along with that, it's farm supplies that are intended for agriculture use. And of course, live animals that are bred for commercial purposes, and which I found interesting, including insects and aquatic animals as well. But I just thought, I think about insects are used for food for pets. My son used to have a gecko a long time ago. So apparently, if you're carrying enough crickets, then it's an ag exemption.
Well, and I think it also applies to bees for pollination.
Yep, that would be the same thing. Now, the main point is, and this is where the confusion comes in on ag exemptions, is there's a 150-mile radius from the first stop. So that perfect circle of 150 miles, and that's as an airplane flies. It's not so if you make 38 turns in there, that 150-mile radius may actually, not even come into play. You may run out of it. So driving to it. So here's just some scenarios of this. It's once you get, again, as you're driving, once you get out you've picked up a load and you get out of it, taking it to the place that you're going to stop, those hours have to be counted. So there's a little work involved. The ELD should actually save you of having to map out every single inch of this. But that's the thing that I think gets people. So if that makes sense, there's a center point where they initially start, and then if you're going farther away, it's always counted. It's not where you start. It's not where your secondary starts. It's always from the initial point of contact.
Okay. I want to kind of get into some of the definitions here. You mentioned farm supplies. I'm assuming here we're talking about, for example, farm equipment, things like fertilizer and seed. Is that the type of stuff that falls under that particular part of the exemption?
Yeah, you pretty much hit it there. Let me just make sure. But yeah, it's got to be stuff used in, the growing or, the cattle and seed and that kind of stuff. Tractors, you pick it. If it's used in farming, and you're sending it to a place used in farming, then the agricultural hours of service apply.
Well, Mark, something that Alex and I were talking about earlier, just as a strategy, if you know that you're going to be operating within a certain area and going to be hauling loads that may fall under ag exemption, it might be worthwhile to call up the maybe a couple of the barracks for the state troopers that are in that area. A quick Google search will give them to you, and just get on the phone with them and say, hey, I need to talk to somebody. I think I'm going to be running in this area, and I think it's going to be ag exempt. And I give you some descriptions of the things I'll be hauling and see what they say. With a lot of exemptions, there's a lot of defining that happens, but when you get down on the road level, sometimes officers will be able to interpret things in one way or another, or they think they'll be able to interpret it in one way or another. So a good kind of extra check to do would be to check with the people, since you're going to be operating within this 150-mile radius and not, a run that takes you through 3 states. You can say, hey, who works here and what do they say about it? What can I get away with them? And what would they stop me for?
Going back to some of the definitions here, do these necessarily have to be farm trucks in order to receive this exemption, or is this solely dependent on what it is that you're hauling?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it is solely dependent on what you're hauling. It doesn't have to be the, the grain truck or anything like that. So I do have another interesting little tidbit for the people that live up on our northern border. If you're crossing over into Canada, Canada doesn't recognize an agricultural exemption. So yeah, I didn't know that till I was reading up on it. Now the funny part is that if Canadian drivers come down into the U.S., they can use the ag exemption. So you just don't want to get, you're up there in Buffalo somewhere or up near the border, and you go across thinking I don't have to have hours of service. It would be a mistake.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of things, you just have to really know what their regulations are if you're going to cross over that international border.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I'm wondering if you can kind of go over another thing I think is very important here. With a lot of exemptions, you're required to carry, for example, if it's an exemption related to some kind of natural disaster or emergency, you often have to have a copy of the governor's order or the actual exemption or something of that nature. What sort of paperwork do you have to have with you in order to use the ag exemption?
Since this is an ongoing exemption, and there's no, I didn't find anywhere where they're considering some exemptions are like for 2 years or for 4 years or something like that. I don't see any of that in my reading. Yeah, just the bill of lading. I mean, that's all they really need. And they're going to look in and see if you're, and I don't even know, I don't see anything about percentages. I think if you've got like crops on there, because they're perishable, that's the issue. That's part of the reason why that's an ongoing. You can't ask somebody to take a 34-hour break for you've got roses in there that haven't been delivered. So that's all that I would suspect is needed.
You brought up something else there that I've been curious about, and we ran into some of this with the pandemic and some of the things that were exempt from various regulations at that time. What if you have a load that includes both some commodities covered under the exemption, but you have like an LTL load and you also have some material that is not covered under the ag exemption? Are you okay as long as you have those agricultural products on board?
Yeah, we had an example of this where there was a split load, and unfortunately, if you are hauling anything that is not covered under an exemption, you need to be running with, well, in this case, with an ELD, and you need to be fully compliant with the rules. So, unfortunately, the DOT got ahead of people who were wanting to kind of cut that corner, and they said, no, if it's a split load and you're carrying part ag exempt things and part not, you have to default to the thing that is not under exemption and follow those rules.
Okay. Well, guys, is there anything else that people need to be aware of about this particular issue that you just want to add?
I would just say that, it's if you're looking to get involved with ag exempt things, most of those rules and the exemptions that apply have to do with hours of service. And if you have the ability to run your ELD and still sort of work with the regular hours of service rules within the ag exemption, might as well just do it. That will save you potentially some hassle. But if you don't, and you want to be able to use the exemption from hours of service rules, just always make sure that you're checking in on your ELD and that you have the paper logs and everything like that. Just make sure that your equipment is in good working order in case you find yourself in a situation where you have to go outside your radius, or you get stopped by an officer and he grills you and says, "Hey, you gotta work your ELD. Oh, you don't have one on you? Oh, I guess too bad you can't run. You're out of service." So basically, best to be prepared. If you suddenly have to work normally within the hours of service regulations, you find yourself outside of the exemption unexpectedly, be prepared.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much. I sure appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks.
I've been talking with David Grimes and Alex Clark of CDL Legal, a legal service provider for the trucking industry, about the ag exemption. You can learn more by calling CDL Legal at 913-738-4836 or by going to their website, cdllegal.com. Again, that phone number is 913-738-4836 or go to the website, cdllegal.com. You can also call in compliance questions to the folks at OOIDA's Compliance Department. Just dial the main number, 816-229-5791, and ask for compliance. Again, that phone number is 816-229-5791. And you can find all that information on our website, landlinenow.com. Just click on the photo or headline at the top of the page. That's where you'll find all the website links, email addresses, and phone numbers we mention here on the show. Again, that's at our website, landlinenow.com. We'll be back in just a moment with more news and information. Please stay with us for a short commercial break. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine Vibertech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with Vibertech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truck Stop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Loadboard Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, the man who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. Marty has been making his way through the upper Midwest of late, and he'll spend the 4th of July weekend in Wisconsin. He'll tell us about his recent travels, along with other thoughts on the DOT physical process. He says he and visitors to the tour truck have noticed some frustrating issues and inconsistencies with the process of late. We'll touch on that and more.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Marty, what is going on? How you doing?
I am lovely, Scott. And you?
Doing okay. Getting in the swing of summer here. The heat is coming and just trying to keep cool, as is everybody else, I think, these days. So doing all right. Speaking of the weather, I know you've been spending a little time in the upper Midwest of late, and I think that's going to continue on this weekend as well, right?
Absolutely. Right now we're at the Quick Star here in South Beloit, Illinois. That's exit 1 on I-39. After this, we go to, for the 4th and the 5th, we'll go to the Quick Trip in Belmont, Wisconsin, and that's Highway 151, exit 26. So we'll spend the 4th of July there.
Have you bought any fireworks yet? You going to shoot off any fireworks up there?
No, I don't think I better since I don't know each place's rules on that. So I'll just let other people do it and I'll go out and watch.
There you go. That's probably wise.
How about you?
Yeah, we'll probably shoot some off, in the driveway. Nothing too crazy, but there's always people around us firing off every single thing that they bought at all the fireworks tents around town. So certainly a loud couple of days, that's for sure. But yeah, always a fun time around these parts. We always pick your brain, obviously, because you're talking to a lot of folks out there. And I understand you've been hearing from a few people who are having issues or noticing issues with their DOT physicals. What's going on there?
Yeah, it really seems like more and more, if they've been going to the same doctor and that doctor either retires or moves or whatever the case may be, you need to find a different doctor. And the last couple people that I've talked to here at the trailer that have had any issues, a lot of it has nothing to do with the set rules and regulations. It's more how the doctor perceives things. And the bad thing is, we as drivers, we are going to see that doctor for probably about 15 to 30 minutes. And they're trying to make a determination whether you are physically fit enough to drive a truck. The problem with that is, number one, it's not enough time for them to actually do that. And most of the people I've talked to have really wish it would go back to what it was, where you could go to your own doctor that didn't have to be certified through because that's a mess in itself, according to the doctors that I've talked to, trying to get that all the way through to become certified. And each one of these doctors look at you differently. I've had a doctor, I was on let's just say some medication for years. And all of a sudden I got a new DOT doc, and he looks at what I'm taking, because I'm honest, I write everything down. So there's no, qualms about, what's happening with me physically. And he said, well, with you on these drugs, I won't be able to pass you today for your physical. And it's like, hold it. I've been doing this for years, haven't had an issue, no tickets, no accidents. And one of our members just came in the other day and he said he went through the same thing. He had a new DOT doc, And all of a sudden, that doctor says, even though you've been on this medication for 30 years, I'm not going to pass you. And these medications are not prohibited.
Right.
So it's just up to that doctor if he thinks you're going to be affected, because there are medications that might make you drowsy, but not for everybody, and especially for people that have taken this stuff for a long time. So somehow we need to kind of be able to take a look at those type of things, and it shouldn't come down to one doctor and his own opinion on that, because it just doesn't seem right. It's not fair for the driver. And another thing is, a lot of folks out there that don't drive and don't have to do these physicals don't understand the anxiety that the drivers have when they go to the DOT doc, because it's ultimately up to that doctor to give you a yes or a no. And so your livelihood hangs in the balance every time you go get a physical.
Yeah.
No matter how much you try, the anxiety level is going to go up. Your blood pressure is going to go up. You're probably not going to sleep well the night before, but none of that is taken into consideration. They just expect you to have the perfect numbers, and if you don't, guess what? You're out of a job. Or maybe you have a caring doctor that says, okay, we're going to give you 3 months, 6 months, whatever, to get your numbers back in order. And even then, it's not guaranteed that once you have come down a little bit on those numbers, whether the doctor is going to pass you or not. So we have a broken system. And, we still have doctors out there that swear up and down you have to get a sleep apnea test to drive. We have doctors that, like I said, that if you have medication on that list, and you're being honest, because you could leave it off, and the only time anybody would really find out is if you got in an accident, and then they're going to find out everything.
Yeah.
So when you're being honest, you shouldn't be penalized for being honest. And to me, they should reach out to the doctor, your own doctor that you're getting those medications from, so that way they can kind of take a look and talk to that doctor and say, hey, how is this guy, how is he coming along with that medication? Is he having to have more and more of it, or whatever the case may be, where you could see signs that it could turn into a problem.
Yeah, that's frustrating, I think, is a word that probably isn't strong enough there. But, lack of uniformity in kind of enforcing those regulations certainly is confusing at the very least as well. But as you point out, I'm not sure what we can all do about that. I know FMCSA did make some changes to the medical examiner handbook several months ago, I think it was, maybe to start the year here, but none of them really address what you're talking about there. But I don't guess we're going to solve that problem today, are we, Marty?
No, but they are very infamous for doing things in the gray area, kind of like personal conveyance. We have people that still get caught up on that personal conveyance because there's some gray area there, and you'd almost be better cut and dry. It's where you would know that yes, you're going to be illegal, or no, you're not. There's not this in between where it all depends on the officer, or with these DOT physicals, it's all up to the doctor that you're actually seeing.
Yeah, no doubt. Marty, we don't have a whole lot of time here. I did want to ask you about one other thing. Speaking of not gray areas, black and white areas, I suppose, move-over laws. We've talked about these before, and obviously most people out there, most truck drivers, I think, are abiding by it. But you're noticing some problems out there on the road, aren't you?
Yeah, and it's, the majority of it is cars, but we still have some new to the industry drivers that don't get that concept of moving over if you can. And if you can't, then slow down. I'd say 20 mile an hour under the speed limit so you can react quicker if something does go wrong. But you don't see a lot of that anymore. You would think with all the new rules and laws out there that you would, and we shouldn't even have to have laws like that.
Yeah, and we have seen a number of states in recent months enact new move-over laws, and we've talked about them here on the show. But as you point out, it's a good reminder. Always do that. You see flashing lights up there, move over when and where you can, and make sure everybody's safe out there for sure. Marty, we've run out of time, unfortunately, but we'll give you the last word here. What do you got to say?
Hey, guys, just be kind to one another and give that guy next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day on our website, landlinenow.com. That's our show for today. From all of us here at Landline Media, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.